Snow fell heavy that night, the kind that muffled every sound and blanketed the mountains in a white silence so thick it felt like time itself had stopped. Inside a rough-hewn log cabin, Jonas Hale, the mountain man folks in town called the Ghost of Hollow Ridge, sat alone beside his fire. The old iron kettle hissed softly as it boiled, the only sound in the cabin besides the wind howling outside. Jonas hadn't had visitors in years. He didn't want them. He'd built this cabin to get away from people, from memories, from the world that had taken too much and left too little. He'd buried his wife in the valley below, then watched his baby boy cough himself into a grave the following winter. After that, he decided he'd had enough of love and enough of loss. He'd built walls thicker than the logs around him, but even the thickest walls can't stop a sound like knocking in the middle of a blizzard. Bang, bang. Jonas froze mid-sip. The mug trembled slightly in his hand. He wasn't sure at first if he'd imagined it. Wind could make all kinds of noises in a storm like this. But then it came again, louder, desperate, bang, bang, bang. He rose slowly, pulling his old rifle from beside the hearth. "Ain't nobody out there," he muttered to himself, his voice rough from disuse. "Nobody with sense anyhow." When he unlatched the door, the wind slammed it open, nearly knocking him backward. Snow blasted in, sharp as needles. Through the swirling white, he saw two small figures huddled together. Children. Their faces were pale, lips blue, eyes wide with fear and fever. The older one, a boy no more than 12, was holding the younger, a girl maybe 7, in his arms. She wasn't moving much. "Please," the boy croaked, voice trembling. "Please, mister. She's so cold." Jonas's breath caught. For a second, his instincts screamed to shut the door, to protect himself from more pain. But then the girl let out a weak whimper, just a sound, a fragile spark of life, and something deep inside him cracked. "Get in," he said gruffly, stepping aside. "Quick now, before the wind kills us all." He shut the door hard against the storm and pulled the latch tight. Snow scattered across the floor as the boy stumbled inside, still clutching his sister. Jonas moved fast. Years alone hadn't made him slow. He grabbed a blanket from the cot and wrapped the girl, then another for the boy. Their clothes were thin, torn at the seams, soaked through. "Where you come from?" he asked, kneeling beside the fire as he fetid another log. The boy hesitated, teeth chattering. "Town, south of here." The home burned down. "The other kids—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "We didn't have anywhere to go." Jonas stared at him. "The orphanage? That fire last week?" The boy nodded weakly. "We walked all night." Jonas cursed under his breath. That fire had been the talk of the town when he'd gone for supplies. 6 children had died. He hadn't known 2 survived, hadn't known they were wandering these frozen mountains, searching for someone, anyone. He poured hot water into a tin cup and pressed it into the boy's shaking hands. "Drink slow," he said. Then, softer. "What's your name, son?" "Eli," the boy said. "This is my sister Rose." Jonas nodded once. "Jonas Hale, you're safe here." Eli's gaze flickered toward the fire. "She's sick," he whispered. "Coughed all day. I tried to keep her warm, but—" Jonas didn't need to hear more. He could see it. The dark flush on the girl's cheeks. The rasp in her breath, pneumonia. The same sound that had filled his cabin years ago when his own child lay dying in that same corner. He clenched his jaw. "You picked a hell of a night to knock on my door," he said, voice rough. But even as he said it, he was moving, fetching a pot, boiling water, tearing up old cloth for rags. He'd been alone for so long, he'd forgotten what it was like to move for someone else's sake. He mixed herbs from a tin, crushed dried leaves between his fingers. The smell of pine and bitterness filled the air. "She needs heat and rest," he muttered, more to himself than to Eli. "You both do." "Will she die?" Eli asked suddenly. Jonas stopped stirring. For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire. Then he said quietly, "Not if I can help it." He laid the girl near the fire and covered her with blankets. Her tiny hand slipped from beneath the fabric, and without thinking, Jonas took it, small, cold, fragile. She stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering open. "Are you—" "My pa?" she whispered weakly. Jonas froze. His throat tightened. And for a heartbeat, he couldn't find his voice. Finally, he said, "No, little one." "But you're safe now," she smiled faintly. Mama said, "Someone would find us." Jonas turned away quickly, pretending to stir the fire. "Rest now," he said softly. "We'll talk come morning." As the hours passed, the storm outside grew fiercer. The wind screamed against the cabin walls, but inside, the air grew warm. The boy, Eli, fell asleep beside his sister, his small hand still gripping hers. Jonas sat awake all night, feeding the fire, checking the girl's breathing, remembering another small body wrapped in blankets that hadn't lived through the night. He'd buried that memory deep, but now it clawed its way back. At dawn, the storm broke. Pale sunlight spilled through the frosted window. Rose's fever had dropped a little. She was still weak, but alive. Jonas leaned back in his chair, eyes red, heart heavy and light all at once. He hadn't prayed in years, but that morning, he whispered, "Thank you." As the children slept, he looked at them and realized something that both warmed and terrified him. The world had given him another chance to be what he'd lost. And for the first time in a decade, the cabin didn't feel so empty.